I planned to spend the weekend at my parents' house. When my husband suddenly declared it was my parents' 40th wedding anniversary, I asked him if everything was okay. I figured I should celebrate with them. I said, "Really? Then I should go too, right?" I considered it but replied, "It's their anniversary, not a birthday. I feel bad dragging you away from your busy work schedule." He was right. I'd be coming off a night shift that day. I decided to take his advice as an opportunity to relax at home. I get along well with his parents and they always take good care of me. Maybe I could send something later to celebrate. I'm Rachel, a nurse and 32 years old. I met my husband John 3 years ago, and we've been married for 2 years now. It feels like we've been together for a long time, but nothing compared to his parents' 40 years. John's parents have a beautiful relationship, always going out together and even holding hands while taking walks. I look up to them, especially since my own parents are divorced. I've always dreamed of having a similar kind of relationship with my husband. One Friday night, John came home with bags full of groceries. "I'm cooking at home tomorrow," he announced. Cooking is his hobby and he's quite good at it. While I tend to focus on whether something is edible, John relentlessly pursues the deliciousness of food. We usually take turns cooking, and John's meals are always delicious. Of course, he uses quality ingredients. The worst part is he always leaves me to do the dishes, not just the dishes but the pots and pans too. I've asked him to not just cook but also do the dishes, but he never seemed to listen. "Don't leave the dishes for your mother to take care of, okay?" I reminded him, not wanting to burden his mother on such a special day. He brushed it off casually, saying, yeah, as if he didn't take it too seriously, which left me feeling slightly irritated. I asked him to say hi to his parents for me and started getting ready for my night shift. The following day, after my shift, I was woken up by a call on my cell phone. It was from my father-in-law. This was unusual because my mother-in-law is usually the one to call. As I answered the phone, I heard my father-in-law's frantic voice on the other end. "Rachel, my wife has collapsed. What should I do?" "What?" I jumped out of bed and asked for details. Apparently, she suddenly collapsed and it seems she has a fever. It's been pretty hot out, so it could be a heat stroke. She was only half conscious, he explained. I told him to call an ambulance and let me know where she would be taken. I decided to drive to my in-laws' house, which is about a 40-minute drive from my home. I attempted to reach my husband by phone, but he didn't answer or return my calls. Just as I started to give up, my father-in-law called again. It was as I suspected. My mother-in-law had suffered a heat stroke and was rushed to the hospital. Arriving at the hospital, I found my father-in-law. He reassured me that my mother-in-law's condition wasn't critical and that she was currently receiving an IV. As I made my way toward her hospital room, I asked, "By the way, where's John? Is he with her?" My father-in-law looked puzzled. "Wasn't he with you? I tried calling him first but couldn't get through, so I called you. I'd assumed he was driving." Confusion creased my brow. "But John was supposed to be at your place, wasn't he?" Now it was my father-in-law's turn to furrow his brow. We exchanged puzzled looks as we walked, our conversation interrupted as we arrived at my mother-in-law's room. "Thank God it's nothing serious," I sighed with relief. Upon hearing that, my mother-in-law, looking less energetic than usual, managed a smile. "I'm sorry for all the trouble. Were you at work today?" "I just finished my night shift, actually." "Where's John? Is he working?" I asked, realizing something wasn't right. Her words hit me. "He said he was coming over to cook you guys a special anniversary meal." The three of us exchanged glances, sensing that something was amiss. I tried calling John again, finally getting through after several attempts. I managed to get through to him. "Oh, thank goodness. Where are you?" I asked. "I'm at my parents', cooking up a storm as filial duty," he responded, his voice mixed with the sound of chopping over the phone. Thinking quickly, I covered up my confusion. "I see. I must have been half asleep. Sorry about that. You're probably tired from work." I told him you were working, so rest up, I added, trying to sound nonchalant. John insisted he was at his parents' place, but his parents were right in front of me. So, who on earth was John cooking for? Was he cheating on me? Were there any signs of it elsewhere? I tried to recall our past interactions but couldn't remember anything that might confirm such a suspicion. If I had to point out something, He had been coming home late more often lately. I also happened to find a receipt from his store for beer and hard seltzer a while ago. I had asked about the hard seltzer because John only drinks beer. He told me he bought some drinks with a colleague on their way home, having a venting session. I found his explanation understandable and accepted it. These points alone didn't constitute conclusive evidence. Lost in these thoughts, my concerned father-in-law came out of the room to check on me. "Is something wrong? Is John coming?" he asked. I hesitated. It seems like he had to make an unexpected stop at work. He needs to take care of some trouble and might have to work through the night today. I quickly fabricated a lie. "I see. I'm sorry to put you through all of this. It looks like everything's fine now, so go home and rest," I reassured my father-in-law. Upon hearing his words, I nodded and headed home. If John really was having an affair, what should I do? If he was going to come home soon, it might be best to pretend I knew nothing. I still loved John, and I got along well with his parents. John was always concerned about me, whether it was my work or my health. He always showed care and worry. Thinking through my next move, I arrived home and decided to investigate my husband's belongings. I entered his room. Since I frequently entered his room, I didn't find anything suspicious. When I returned to the living room, I noticed a computer. I have my own laptop, so I never use this one. Perhaps I find something here. I opened the browser history. It appeared he had been browsing travel sites, specifically hotels with kitchens. Was that why he had stocked up on groceries? Was he planning a romantic getaway with a mistress? Still, I wasn't suspicious of my husband to that extent yet. Maybe today he was simply gathering with friends, for all I knew. Perhaps he had lied about going to his parents' place because he felt guilty about going to have fun. While I was at work, a disturbing realization shattered my thoughts. I stumbled upon a bookmark for a photo-saving site on John's computer, and with a sinking feeling, I found undeniable evidence of an affair. There were numerous photos of John with another woman at romantic spots, amusement parks, and some appeared to be from trips they took together. Shockingly, there were even intimate photos among them. What's worse, it became clear that this had been going on shortly after we got married, meaning John had been deceiving me for 2 years. The realization hit me hard, and I knew I couldn't continue living in denial. I also discovered their email exchanges. In one email, I learned that the other woman shared the same birthday as me. Reading through their correspondence and seeing the photos, I saw that he showered her with jewelry and watches for her birthdays, while I received practical gifts like aprons or recipe books to improve my cooking on mine. The contrast in the gifts was stark. To make matters worse, he celebrated her on the day we shared our birthday. Despite my occasional night shifts, I never imagined she was the one he prioritized over me. My feelings toward John underwent a complete reversal. The other woman turned out to be a junior colleague of John's who had even attended our wedding. I remember she came up to me and said, "I have the same birthday as you." From the emails I found, it appeared that the mistress initiated the affair, but John readily accepted her invitations to go out. In one email, I discovered he had written, "My wife earns a decent income and nurses me without complaints when I'm sick, so I don't plan on divorcing her for now." Upon finding this, I couldn't stay silent. I decided on divorce and captured some of this evidence on my phone. Realizing it was already midnight, I decided to go to bed. The next day, I started searching for a divorce attorney but felt lost on where to begin. Lost in my thoughts, the doorbell rang. I flinched, thinking it might be my husband returning home. However, when I opened the door, it was my mother-in-law. Startled, I invited her in. She told me she had returned home from the hospital the previous day after receiving her IV and had come to thank me, bringing a small gift. As I spoke with my mother-in-law, a wave of sadness washed over me. I was fortunate to have such wonderful in-laws, and the thought of losing them was heartbreaking. Sensing my distress, my mother-in-law spoke kindly to me. "If something's bothering you, you can talk to me about it." Moved by her words, I couldn't hold back. I poured out everything to her. When I finished, I worried she might be angry at what I had said about her son. "Is that true? That's unforgivable," she said solemnly. I showed her the evidence of John's infidelity, and she became increasingly upset. "Cheating makes no one happy. Why would John do something like this?" she exclaimed. Then, to my surprise, my mother-in-law made a proposal I hadn't expected. "Rachel, why don't you pack your bags and come to our house?" "What?" I was still taken aback when my mother-in-law began making a phone call. It became clear she was speaking to my father-in-law, instructing him to prepare a room for me at their home. Encouraged by her support, I started packing my essentials. I grabbed a change of clothes and my laptop. We decided to handle the larger items later. After loading my bag into my car, my mother-in-law joined me, and we drove to their house where my father-in-law welcomed us. In the living room, there was a woman I didn't recognize. I soon learned she was a lawyer my father-in-law had contacted at my mother-in-law's request. In situations like this, you have to act quickly, my father-in-law remarked, looking satisfied with himself. In front of my in-laws, I explained to the lawyer that I wanted a divorce and intended to seek alimony. I struggled to keep up with the sudden twists of events, but expressing my intentions gave me a newfound sense of determination. The realization that I was being treated like a cash cow by my husband and his mistress made my blood boil, and even his own parents were furious at his behavior. That night, I received a call from home. "Where are you?" I dropped my cell phone in water and couldn't contact you. "Sorry." John's voice came through. The sound of his voice only fueled my anger. "I've moved out. It's up to you whether you want to stay or move out. I'll collect the rest of my belongings by the end of the week." John started to panic. "What? What are you talking about? What's happening?" His words did nothing but increase my fury. "You've been cheating on me, and now you're asking what's happening." John, appearing confused, began to babble, asking how I found out. That was when my mother-in-law took the phone from me. "Come home immediately," she commanded. "Huh? Mom, what?" I was bewildered, but ignoring my confused husband, I hung up the phone. Less than an hour later, John arrived at his parents' house. "Rachel, what's going on? Why are you here?" he asked urgently as he rushed inside, hastily opening the door. "How did it feel to cook homemade meals for your mistress in a hotel with a kitchen?" I confronted him coldly. John went pale at my words. "How did you have the nerve to say that? We were going to celebrate your parents' 40th anniversary with a homemade meal. You had the audacity to go on trips with your lover while your mother was in the hospital. What happened to Mom then?" I accused, my anger unabated. At that moment, John's father emerged and started yelling. "Your mother was taken away in an ambulance. I called you several times. You're not welcome in this house after today. Once we're done talking, don't ever show your face here again. I want you to return the car you drove here. It's still in my name," John's father demanded, snatching the car keys from him. Knowing how inconvenient it would be for John to lose his commuting option, I felt a bitter sense of satisfaction. My mother-in-law emerged, her voice filled with anger. "We know everything about your shameful affair. Your father and I are on Rachel's side. With our lawyer already gone, I directly expressed my intention to get a divorce." John's face turned pale as he panicked. "Divorce? We can't. I always help with household chores. I even cook." His desperate reaction made me sigh. "Helping out with household chores? You mean taking out the trash or putting away laundry? You don't even know how to use the washing machine. Have you ever cleaned the bathroom or the toilet?" "But I cook," John insisted. His words made me snap. "You claim to cook, but cooking is complete when you clean up afterward. You buy fancy ingredients, cook, and then act all smug, saying, 'Isn't it delicious?' Of course it's delicious. Shouldn't you consider the food expenses when cooking?" John, obviously irritated, retorted, "Ha, my dishes taste way better than yours. Cleaning up is easy. It's the cooking that's hard. Just yesterday, my girl told me everything was delicious." He was clearly referring to his mistress. Of course, in a hotel kitchen, you don't have to worry about cleaning up. She got to enjoy the expensive food you bought with your money, so of course she thought it was delicious. John, not liking my tone, snapped back, "Fine then, let's get a divorce or whatever. I'm done with you." He stormed out of the house. With his car keys taken away by my father-in-law, he reluctantly started walking. He looked pathetic from the back. The following day, I began making arrangements for the divorce, feeling a mix of relief and determination. I closed the bank account from which our living expenses were withdrawn. I wasn't going to pay rent or utility bills with my money anymore. I sent the divorce papers to John, ensuring to include a substantial claim for property division and compensation for emotional distress. Perhaps out of rage, John agreed to the divorce and even the financial terms. He made a single payment to cover the expenses, but it appeared his savings fell short, forcing him to take out a loan from a consumer loan company. When I went to pick up my belongings later, I noticed some unfamiliar items in the house. Perhaps the mistress had moved in, but that wasn't my problem anymore. I demanded compensation from the mistress through my lawyer as well. A month later, I received a phone call from my ex-husband. I'm receiving bills for rent and electricity. He just realized it now. Well, that's to be expected since the bills weren't being automatically withdrawn anymore. Of course you're receiving them. I've closed the bank account we were using for withdrawals. My ex-husband was speechless. Why should I be responsible for paying rent for a place I don't even live in? Your standard of living will have to drop a bit, but you guys will figure it out. Although I doubt you can afford to keep living there on your salary. With that, I hung up the phone. He makes about half of what I make. If he pays the rent, he'll hardly have any money left for living expenses. The truth is, I had been covering a significant portion of our living expenses. My ex-husband later asked to reconcile, but of course I ignored him. According to John's parents, he became uncomfortable at his job and quit. He showed up at their place, but his father turned him away. I had already moved out of his parents' house and rented an apartment. I don't communicate with my ex-husband anymore, but I occasionally get in touch with his parents and we still have a good relationship. Seeing them walking hand in hand to this day, I made up my mind to find someone with whom I could eventually have such a relationship.